right here, we have a presentation right here. So, really, so airline operations, right? Chapter 9, pricing and revenue management. Right, so summarize the methods airlines managers control, right? So really, the summary of these strategies, right? There's a bunch of strategies that airlines use in order to actually, be able to sell their tickets or sell their seats and manage their revenue. That's overbooking, right? Because okay, before I actually start with anything, you need to understand that airlines will airlines have a set number of supply, which is cool because they know how much supply they're playing with, but that kind of puts the pressure on them in order to we need to actually sell this supply or else it's just gonna spoil, right? And it's perishable, right? And so one strategy to kind of combat that is overbooking, right? Self-explanatory, right? They overbook for the sake of filling those seats in order to not lose out on not get any spoil, right? But it's really not as simple as that, right? There's seat allocation. Seat allocation is probably the biggest biggest strategy that airlines use in order to make the most money and maximize profit or maximize revenue whenever selling the seats. So airlines, essentially what they do is airlines like to hold on to certain seats, not to sell them, because they see the potential in those seats to make more money later on. For example, a last minute business passenger, right? And so they might allocate 10 out of 30 seats, they might allocate 15 seats for cheap passengers, but they're going to save those 15 other seats for the higher paying passengers that may come at a later time. They're not going to just sell everything all at once, right? They're going to save them because they see the potential in them, right? Especially on a business heavy route, right? Network allocation is basically the same thing as seat allocation, but kind of doing it in the name of specifically allocating those seats for connecting passengers, right? And not leaving any money on the table because those connecting passengers are also making money on other flights, right? Fair nesting, right? So within economy class, we'll have certain seats priced lower than others in order to create that feeling of scarcity, right? So fair nesting is kind of artificially boosting demand, and saying, hey, come buy this cheaper seat before your only other option is this really more expensive one. So they kind of play psychological games with you to artificially increase demand. So network inventory allocation. So essentially set aside a certain number of seats connecting passengers. So basically network allocation is really what it is. Market segmentation. It's really just more of a strategy of identifying who your customer base is. How much leisure do we have and how much business customers do we have, stuff like that, right? So the characteristics that's really affecting pricing strategy is perishable inventory, right? The concept of that, there's spoil, there's supply, there's only a certain number of supply, and there's no less and no more than that, right? And so the supply has to be sold entirely. And another thing is high fixed costs, like a pilot, flight attendants, maintenance. Those costs, no matter if you fill a plane up or not, those costs are still going to be the same. They're still going to be really high. And other things is uncertain demand. Sometimes not knowing your demand, you don't know what to price the ticket at. So restrictions on passengers. So one other strategy is that in order to sell a cheaper ticket, the passenger might have to do a little something for the airline. They're gonna be like, hey, we have this low price for you, but here's the caveat, right? You have to do a round trip. You have to do this, no refund policy. and no ticket transfer, right? All that stuff. And going back to seat allocation, which is probably the biggest thing in the revenue management, is the driving factor behind seat allocation, which is EMSR, which stands for give me a sec. Stands for expected marginal seat revenue, right? So EMSR is basically the formula behind the brains behind and the formula behind seat/network allocations, right? So the airline, again, seat allocations, what it is basically saving some seats for later for higher paying customers. So EMSR basically is a metric that gives the airline a ratio of how many cheap seats to allocate and how many more expensive seats to hold, right? And EMSR is really the biggest, most important metric whenever it comes to managing product revenue. Here's an example. So remember, one overbooking. I was on a seat. This is how really overbooking works. The theme of revenue management really is mainly seat allocation and overbooking. Now, whenever an airline overbooks, right, they'll offer a $250 voucher, right? Most people won't take that voucher because they're going to be like, oh, I paid $350 for my ticket. But that one person that paid $150, you're gonna be like, yeah, I'll take that $250 in order to allow the person that paid $550 on the airplane, right? Basically making more money for the airline, right? Overbooking isn't just brainless, it's actually calculated, right? Especially with the vouchers. They're gonna give vouchers to the lowest, right? So they can kind of encourage the really cheap passengers to get off the airplane, so they can allow the high-paying passengers on the airplane. Does that make sense? It does make sense. So to answer the question, I did get a bump one time. Me and my brother, we got business class on Emirates one time, and I remember why. I think we bought a ticket that gave us a lot of points, and so they overbooked, right? But they didn't overbook on business class, and so they bumped the highest paying economy class members into business class, and so that they can allow the other economy class people to go in. I guess that's why I got bumped. A delay, it's probably because probably some safety, I'm not too sure, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Goodbye.